Walker.
And I'm Michael Holmes. Time to update you on the day's top stories. And the U.S. President Donald Trump announcing he is recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and plans to move the American embassy there from Tel Aviv.
Mr. Trump's decision breaks with 70 years of U.S. foreign policy, but the president also said Washington is still committed to a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Israeli prime minister praised the move, and he called on other countries to follow Washington's lead.
But outside of Israel, it was met with international condemnation. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said the decision will aid extremist organizations and, quote, lead us into wars that will never end. A busy Los Angeles freeway has just reopened after being shut down for hours because of wildfires.
But several fierce fires are still burning in and around the city and neighboring Ventura County. That is your CNN News Now. Reaction to the U.S. decision on Jerusalem is not just drawing comments from political leaders, but also religious ones.
Pope Francis has now expressed his concern for the situation.
I cannot hide my deep concern about the situation that has developed in the last days. I pray that wisdom and prudence can prevail.
American evangelicals, though, they're cheering the move, which Mr. Trump promised, of course, during his presidential campaign.
Now, take a look at this. In a recent Pew survey, there were about 62 million evangelical Protestants in the U.S., and in a Bloomberg poll, almost 60% of them said they would back Israel regardless of U.S. interests.
According to the Pew Research Center, 82% of evangelicals believe God gave the land of Israel to the Jewish people. That's compared to just 40% of American Jews who believe the same.
And one pastor from the U.S. state of Florida says evangelicals are ecstatic over the U.S. president's decision. Joining us now with his perspective is the producer and director of Waiting for Armageddon. That's the documentary filmmaker, David Heilbronner. David, we appreciate you joining us. We know, according to our political reporters, that this decision by President Trump to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital was about appealing to his core supporters, his Republican conservatives and evangelical Christians. I didn't know that they made up the biggest pro-Israel bloc in the United States. Help us understand why evangelical Christians are so invested in the issue of Jerusalem and Israel as a whole.
Well, it all comes down to what's called rapture theology. Evangelicals, a vast majority of them, believe that in order for Jesus Christ to return in the second coming, the city of Jerusalem has to remain under Israeli control. So for Christian evangelicals, this is a universally important event. This isn't just politics. This is the fate of mankind. And so, if you notice, in Trump's latest announcement, he had Mike Pence standing over his shoulder. It's a wink and a nod to a powerful single voting bloc. You could analogize them to the NRA. And so this is a, believe it or not, a biblically inspired statement from Trump.
And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but many in Israel are no fans of the more extreme elements of the evangelicals, the ones who do believe in that Christ isn't coming until it's all controlled. Is that right?
Well, they have a funny relationship because on the one hand, evangelicals think that all Jews either have to convert or they're going to be damned. On the other hand, a lot of Israelis think they don't really believe in this theology, and they're just happy to have evangelicals come and bring tourism and bring political and financial support.
But just help us reconcile what the Pope has said. I mean, the ultimate Christian, where he's voiced concerns, deep concerns about President Trump's unprecedented move, a concern that this would inflame conflicts around the world, with how American evangelicals are supporting President Trump's decision. How do you reconcile these two very different reactions?
Sure. I mean, first of all, this is Pope Francis, probably the most progressive pope in my lifetime and probably many people's lifetimes. The Pope doesn't really speak for Christian evangelicals. It's the Catholic Church, which is a very different body altogether. Christian evangelicals, you might turn to someone like Pastor John Hagee out of Texas, with a 20,000 member megachurch, but actually it also is immensely influential in Washington. Those are the people who hold this literalist belief about Israel having to remain intact and Jerusalem having to remain under Israeli control for the second coming to occur. It's really not part of Catholic theology.
And they, as you point out, they have a big supporter in the Vice President Michael Pence. So, religion creeping its way into politics in some ways. How powerful is this lobby?
Well, the lobby is hugely powerful. The closest analogy is the NRA. This is a group of tens of millions of Americans who are motivated by a powerful belief, probably one of the most fundamental human beliefs, which is religious conviction. And in this case, Trump is sending a message to them saying, I hear you. I have your back. I'm going to make sure Jerusalem stays in the hands of the Israelis and remains central to American foreign policy. So it's an enormously galvanizing, motivating movement by Trump that will pay off.
A question that I think a lot of people have around the world, especially when it comes to evangelical Christians, is, I guess, their priorities when it comes to moral standards and political issues. I, for one, was raised in a Christian home. My parents, always emphasized high morals, values, and standards like don't lie, respect everyone, don't discriminate against people because of their undocumented status or for being gay. Are these kinds of moral issues not a priority for evangelical Christians? And I ask is because, many would say that President Trump is the antithesis of these kinds of Christian values.
Those moral issues are very important to evangelicals. And evangelicals, you have to understand, you don't want to speak about a group of 30, 40 million people with a too broad a brush, but tend to be educated, morally conscious individuals. This is, however, sort of like talking to an NRA member and you bring up the Second Amendment. This is the hot button issue. And so, the fact that Trump is maybe a fallen individual in their eyes is much less important than keeping this central piece of history moving forward. And in their idea, in the evangelical theology, the central piece of history is keeping Jerusalem in the hands of Israel.
And that prioritizes over whether he's a beacon of morality or not, because they're going to the end. The end is the end, and the aims. The way of getting there is immaterial in a way. Do you think that there's any? Is there any concern that this is really religion getting into politics and getting into international politics?
It is, and it's very concerning because religion is fundamentally, by definition, a leap of faith. It's non-demonstrable, and it's very scary when you see people making foreign policy based upon or heavily influenced by simple leaps of faith. And it destroys the chance of dialogue with, let us say, Arab countries who don't hold this belief about the universe and the fate of mankind turning upon Jesus' second coming. So it's extremely dangerous. But for the evangelicals, if this indeed comes to pass, what will happen is the great war of Armageddon, where the armies of the earth converge upon Jerusalem and have the great final battle. It signals the end of mankind and the start of the second coming. So it's in a way it's welcome by this contingent, even the scary bellicose part of it.
Well, perhaps by watching your documentary, it'll help us understand more about these evangelical Christians waiting for Armageddon. Producer and filmmaker David Heilbronner, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, in Washington, calls for Democratic Senator Al Franken to resign are rapidly gaining momentum.
During the past few hours, more than 24 of his fellow Democratic senators,